Hello. I'm kind of excited because I get to read one of my favorite books in all of the Pathways books that we have to you. This one is called 20 and 10. And if you look at the picture, you can see the Nazi soldiers sitting there and the kids that are hidden underground. There's definitely some suspense in this story. I'm going to read the back to you just to kind of give you an idea of where the story is headed. If we take these children, we can never betray them, no matter what the Nazis do. During the German occupation of France, 20 French children were brought to a refuge in the mountains. One day, a young man came to their school with a request. Could they take in and hide 10 Jewish refugee children? Sister Gabriel spoke up. The Nazis are looking for those children. If we take them, we must never let on that they are here. Do you understand? Of course the children understood. But how would they hide them if the Nazis came? This book, there are only 5 chapters in it. And so there might be one or two chapters that I read only part of the chapter and I stop and and then put the video for the rest of the chapter on the next day. All right, so be prepared for that. And if I stop in the middle of the chapter or even at the end of a chapter, you may want to read more. And that's okay. You are welcome to listen to it as fast as you want to. And remember, this time can also go towards your daily reading time. Okay? All right, chapter 1, Make Believe. I'm hoping that you have your book so that you can look at the pictures carefully. I'm going to put this up here so that you can kind of see the picture. All right? It all started when we were playing at the Flight into Egypt. Make Believe. It was in the schoolyard at recess time, right after the Christmas vacation, beginning of the year 1944. I have to write all about it now, lest I forget later on, the way most grown-ups do forget the very important things, such as not talking about a treasure, not asking what one is thinking about. If I write now all I remember about it, perhaps when I am old, let us say 20, somebody may find these pages and make a book. But that is a very long way off. I am only 13, and I was 11 when it happened. My name is Janet. There were also George and Philip and Henry and Denise and Louis and many others, 20 in all, and we were all 5th graders except Louis, who was only 4 years old, but was allowed to be with us because he was Denise's little brother. And this was permitted because the war was on and France was occupied. That means that the Nazi soldiers were there and that they had taken over France and they were saying how things could be run. And the children were herded all together where it was safest for them to be. In our town, the boys' school and the girls' school were combined and each grade was sent somewhere in the country. So that would be like our whole class being moved to one place and another class being moved someplace else. We, the 5th graders, boys and girls, were given that lovely old house on the top of a mountain. It was called Beauvallen, Beautiful Valley, because we could see the valley for miles and miles from up there, and it was very beautiful. Anyway, we were all up there, the 5th graders and Louis, and Sister Gabriel was with us. And we were very happy because we just loved her. She was young and gay and quick. Gay here means happy. She never walked, she flew. Now, as I was saying at the very beginning, we were playing at the Flight into Egypt. I was Mary, and George was Joseph, and Louis was the little one. The other boys and girls asked, "And who are we going to be?" I said, "The Egyptians, of course, can't you see? The 3 of us, Joseph, the little one, and myself, we are DPs, refugees, Jewish refugees. We have fled into Egypt." "Why?" asked Denise. "Because King Herod wanted to kill the little one. Don't you remember? Sister Gabriel told us all about it," I said proudly. "What do we Egyptians do?" asked Philip. Then it was that Henry said flatly, "We sell." Sell? I cried. Well, what do you think? Went on Henry. Jewish refugees have got to eat just like the others, don't they? I didn't know what to say because I didn't want to make Henry angry. He is so very good at make-believe games. Also, it was really because of him that I was Mary. George said he did not want a fair Mary. That would be one that was blonde. He said it was all wrong since Mary was dark. And I was furious because I knew all the time he said that because he prefers Denise, who was dark. So I said Mary was a blonde, and the proof was that I had seen a picture of her made by a man called Memling. And she did have blonde hair in that picture. Then Henry stepped in and said, George is right, and Janet is right too, because sometimes Mary is dark, and sometimes she is fair. Mary can be French, Spanish, Russian, Negro, Indian, Chinese, anything at all. Denise said, how do you know? And Henry said, I know. And that was that, because Henry is very, very clever. Then he added that since we had a dark Mary for the nativity, Denise, we could have a fair one for the flight into Egypt, and I could be Mary. Henry does like me. Don't you think it is only just? Asked Henry grandly. George nodded. He could hardly do anything else. So I was Mary, and I didn't want to make Henry mad. When he suggested that the Egyptians had to sell to the Holy Family because refugees have got to eat, I had to think very fast for an answer. Henry is right, I said cautiously. All refugees have got to eat. My idea was that we, the little one, Joseph, and myself, we would make the journey first. I pointed to the whole playground. Then when we get to Egypt, you Egyptians give us everything. The baker bread, the butcher meat, the housewives' diapers for the little one. Phew, interrupted Henry, that's no fun. What's the matter with Joseph anyway? He asked, turning toward Joseph George and getting right into the game as he knew so well how to do. Can't you pay for the stuff, Mr. Joseph? Course, said Joseph, I can work. I'm a carpenter. Look, fellow, said Henry, already there are not enough jobs to go around in this village. Henry, I stamped my foot. I was almost cross. Henry, you cannot talk to Joseph that way. To Joseph. Be quiet, ordered Henry. Are we playing or not? Yes, of course. I guess I'm just stupid. Go ahead. Only, I added, don't make it too long because Jesus is awfully heavy in my arms. I think that all of you Egyptians could at least offer me a chair. Philip made the gesture of pushing a chair toward me, and I thanked him. All right, said Henry. Now we men can talk this over. Mr. Joseph, what about your ration cards? We don't have any, answered Joseph. That's bad, mused Henry, stroking an imaginary beard. But as I told you, retorted Joseph, I can work. Not so fast, admonished Henry. I already told you work is no good, and now you have no ration cards. We've got to eat, went on Joseph doggedly. Sure, said Henry. Then he dropped his voice. But you have got money, haven't you? Henry, wailed Denise. She was very sentimental. Don't butt in, snapped Henry. I know what I'm saying. That Mr. Joseph is trying to get work away from us Egyptians, and he has no ration cards. And he pretends he has no money, but he is double-crossing us because, as a matter of fact, he is rich. We all said, oh, we were petrified. That means turned into stones. And Jesus in my arms started to cry. Then I was really cross and I shrieked, see what you have done? Now the little one is crying. You are horrid, Henry, horrid. Everybody knows that the Holy Family was very poor. And there you can see, there's the little one crying. Is that so? Queried Henry, as cool as could be. Well, what about that myrrh, frankincense, and gold the wise men brought them? That's worth a lot. What about it, Mr. Joseph? Everybody was quiet. We were just holding our breath and waiting for Joseph George's answer, but it did not come. Joseph George only looked crestfallen, so I had to speak up. Dear Joseph, I said tenderly, you are so unpractical. This is when we went up to Bethlehem for the census and you had made no hotel reservations in advance. Now what do you think happened to the wise men's gifts? All gone, of course. How could we have taken that long journey and come this far without paying our way through? I have handed over our treasures right and left, and now I have nothing, not a bit of myrrh, not a grain of frankincense, not a mite of gold. See, hold the little one a minute, please." And I got up and gave Joseph the little one. Then I turned my pockets inside out and I shook my dress and I cried, "Look, Egyptians, nothing, nothing. It's a trick," announced Henry. I hardly knew what happened next. It happened so fast. Joseph George put down the little one quickly, glaring at me of all people with blazing eyes. Then he marched toward Henry with closed fists, muttering, "Unpractical, a trick, money, ration cards, work, I'll show you." And suddenly we were all fighting like cats and dogs, some of us on George's side and others on Henry's. But soon we did not know which was which. It was a regular free-for-all, the boys pummeling one another and the girls pulling one another's hair. The soft white wings of Sister Gabriel's headdress flapped hurriedly across the yard. "There, there, children," she called. "Shame on you. No, I don't want to hear about a thing. Think of you getting into a fight when I was just coming to tell you." "What? What?" we cried eagerly, crowding around her. "You will see in the classroom. Quick, now you shake hands with one another and file in on tiptoe." We did. In the classroom, a young man sat on a chair. He looked very tired. He was not shaved. His clothes were covered with dust. We slipped noiselessly to our benches and waited in dead silence until Sister Gabriel made a sign with her head for the young man to speak. When he opened his mouth, his voice had a croak as it does when one has not slept. "Boys and girls," he said, "I have to speak to you just as if you were adults. You know that the Germans occupy France. You know also about the refugees and the DPs." We nodded. "Now do you know that there are people who not only are refugees and DPs, but have absolutely no place to go, because if the Nazis find them, they will kill them?" A shiver ran through the class. "Do you know who those people are?" asked the young man. You could have heard a pin drop, and we were amazed when we saw George raising his hand. He got up and said, "The Jews." We had no idea what he was talking about, but the young man looked very startled and asked, "How did you know?" George became very excited and shrieked, "Because there was Herod and the Egyptians, and I was Joseph, and—" He was all red and confused, and he dropped to a seat and hid his head in his arms. We almost burst out laughing, but we did not dare because the young man was very serious and sad. To our surprise, he said, "That boy is right. It is the same story always throughout the centuries. This time, Herod's soldiers are the Nazis, that's all." He waited a little while, then he asked quietly, "Boys and girls, do you know what happened when Jesus' family was hunted by Herod's soldiers?" We all sang out at once, "They fled into Egypt." "Yes," said the young man, "and they remained hidden there, did they not? Now once more, Jesus' family is hunted and will be killed if we do not hide them. Will you, boys and girls, help? Will you take with you here and hide 10 Jewish boys and girls whose fathers and mothers are dead already?" Of course, we all cried, "Yes, yes." We were absolutely thrilled. This was not make-believe anymore. It was the real thing. Sister Gabriel spoke up. "I did not expect less from you, boys and girls, but you must understand what this means. The Nazis are looking for those children. If we take them, we must never let on that they are here. Never. Even if we are questioned, we can never betray them, no matter what the Nazis do to us. Do you understand?" Well, of course. Had we not played at being the Egyptians? By then, anyway, we could hardly wait to see the new children, and we were delighted when the young man turned to Sister Gabriel and said, "They are hiding in the woods now. We have walked all night. May I bring them in?" Sister Gabriel nodded. The young man went over to her. He took her hand and touched his forehead with it, bowing at the same time, and he said, "You know that you can be shot for this?" Sister Gabriel smiled quietly. "Bring them in quickly," she said. "They must be so tired." And that's the end of chapter 1.